Let me ask, as I always do, is this anybody's first time here to Speaker Series? Okay, a few of you. Well, thank you for coming out. If you've come here often, you know I'm Chris. I'm the Museum Programs Coordinator. I'm kind of one of the people that gets to help decide who's going to come speak here. Or as my buddies back home say, that I just think up people I want to meet and then invite them to the museum. So, yeah. I had a trip back to Pittsburgh here a couple days ago, and I got grief for that. And they're like, what is your job anyway? You just hang out with cool people. And I'm like, well, I won't argue with that. So that's the cool thing about EAA, that we get a chance not to just interview or maybe see a legend or a hero. We get a chance to actually have them here, spend some time with them, and hopefully you guys get to spend a little bit of time, at least maybe ask a question you've always wanted to ask about the SR71 or whatever the subject is that month. So I want to thank you for coming out, supporting the museum, supporting the speaker series. Truly an honor to get to do this here with all of you. Thanks to all of our members. We certainly appreciate it. And thanks for everybody who's coming here for the first time. So tonight is what we do every third Thursday of the month. Usually rain or snow. Unfortunately, we're getting to that point where it's snow. Even Packer games, if there's a Packer game, we still have our speaker series if it's a third Thursday. The lineup is getting locked down for next year. This will be the last regular one of 2019, which, by the way, this has been a record-breaking season for this, and I want to thank all of you who have come out and been part of this. We have our Wright Brothers banquet, December 13th. You guys definitely want to come out and see that if you enjoy that. Steve Hinton Jr. and Sr. are going to be here. Just don't tell Junior that I called him Junior. The January speaker is just getting lined up. Have anybody seen the show Ice Pilots? Okay, well, if you remember the really tall guy that had to fly the C-46, his name's Scott Blue. He's going to come out and spend a couple days in January with us. He's going to be our January speaker. In February, we're going to talk about B-29s. Sean Elliott and myself are going to talk about, Sean's going to talk about the side of flying one of the restored B-29s, Doc. And I'll talk a little bit about the veteran aspect and how the lives of these veterans are being touched by these airplanes. And the March speaker, we just confirmed this week, is Kim Campbell, who is an A-10 pilot. She is a woman who brought her A-10 back, shot up, flying an Operation Enduring Freedom. So she's going to come out and talk about flying the A-10 Warthog. So if anybody came to my gunship talk, you know I kind of like things with a lot of guns on them. So there's a theme there. I like things with a lot of guns and things that can go fast. So, and tonight we're going to talk about going fast. Anybody who's a fan of high altitude X-planes, the SR-71 Blackbird is just a legend. I think anybody that grew up in that era had probably a poster of either this or a Lamborghini on their wall. And this is certainly a special night for us. All the way from Texas, tonight we have Colonel Richard Graham, who's going to come up on stage here and give us a talk about the SR-71. Afterwards, he'll do a little Q&A, and then you will have time to come up, get anything, get something signed, meet him, get a picture, like we try to do every night. So thank you guys for coming. With that, I'm going to give a warm EA welcome to Colonel Richard Graham.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Test, test. We're going out okay. Everyone hear me? Good. First, I want to thank Chris for being my host. He picked me up at the airport, drive me back. He's been taking care of me real good, so thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome.
And I want...
something.
What's that?
I have to interrupt you. The Fox Cities Composite Squadron of the Civil Air Patrol is here to present colors. And I totally forgot. I got my own haze here. So. Sorry, I picked up guys who have guns.
Test, test. First of all, I want to thank Chris. He's been babysitting me ever since he picked me up at the airport. So thank you very much, Chris, for being taking care of me. Also, I'd like to thank EAA for inviting me here. My wife and I have come here. We came about 15 years in a row, and then my wife started getting burnt out, and she said, "I've seen it all. You can go do your own thing." So I still like to come up to Oshkosh. Every year there's something different. And those of you who haven't been there, I encourage you to attend it. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the SR-71. I was very lucky to fly it for 7 years, from 1974 to 1982. And very, very fortunate. Most crew members only flew it for about 4 years, maybe 5 years. 6 was long, and when I got to 7, I knew that was pushing it. So they asked me if I wanted to be the squadron commander, and I said, okay, I'll do the squadron commander. Unfortunately, the squadron commander of the SR-71, unlike any other squadron, you don't fly the airplane. It's so expensive, it has to go to the crews flying the operational missions. I have to apologize a little bit. You're going to find my voice a little bit raspy tonight sometimes. I'm coming down with something, I don't know what, but I got enough to give you a good talk on it. We got a picture up there? I don't know where the picture went. Where's the picture of the SR? Did we lose the picture? I'm looking for my audio-visual help. Did we push the wrong button up here or something? I think somebody pushed something somewhere. I'm not too good at this audio-visual stuff, but it eventually always works out. I'm going to talk a little bit about the beginnings of the SR-71, how it came to be. Then I'll talk about some of the unique features of it, and then I'll sort of take you on a very quick flight, what a typical flight is like. At the very end, I've got a video. It lasts about 5 minutes. It's a tribute to Kelly Johnson, who you will find out is the brains behind the SR-71, as well as many other airplanes. And it's a real good video, has some of the best in-flight photography of the SR-71 you'll ever see. It lasts about 7 minutes. Kristen, were we going to do Q&A at the end or not? If we do, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. And if there's anything I can't talk about, it's all been declassified. This gentleman here is Kelly Johnson. He was head of what's called Lockheed Skunk Works. It's a group of individuals out in Burbank, California, that think way outside the box. They're told to think about 8 to 10 to 15 years down the road of what we need in the United States. And Kelly got a lot of honors for all the airplanes he did, like the U-2, the SR-71, the T-33, the F-104, the Constellation. A genius in his own. And if it wasn't for Kelly, this airplane would never have gotten off the ground. He also did the U-2. That happens to be 0, look at that tail number of this. This is tail number 001. That is the first U-2 that they built at the Skunk Works. Now, a lot of people knew that, flying over Russia, they were finally going to shoot down an SR-71. They were getting more aggressive and more aggressive. And as we know, Gary Powers got shot down on May 1st of 1960. 1960. Now, I want you to back up 2 years to 1958, and I want you to see where Kelly Johnson and a few others realized that the Russians were getting much more aggressive in their attempts to shoot down the U-2. He started conceptualizing an airplane that would go higher and faster than the U-2. He called it was funded by the CIA. It was called Oxcart. That's the CIA's name, Oxcart program. Archangel is what Kelly Johnson called it in the Skunk Works. So that's Archangel number 1. You can see the date on that. It's 2 years before Gary Powers got shot down. There's Archangel number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, 6, 7. There's no 8 or 9. It goes right to Archangel 10. Then you get to Archangel 11. And finally, Archangel 12. It looks like an SR-71. But this airplane is going to be built for the CIA, and it's going to be called the A-12. So that whole 2 years before Gary Powers, thinking way outside the box, way ahead of it. Something to go higher and faster. Now you got to think about the time he was building this airplane. The old adding computers here. This is the old IBM machines. I see many of you probably remember you put a stack of cards in, it spits out the answer with a bunch of cards at the other end. And this thing right here, slide rule. Just for curiosity's sake, if you've ever had to use a slide rule for work, raise your hand. Let's see. Ooh, you're all dating yourselves, okay. That's more than I thought. But that's what he was building this A-12 with, the kind of computers. Blackbird family, 3 airplanes. I'm going to talk about the A-12 that we just talked about. Single seat, funded for, paid for, flown by CIA people. It flew from May of 67 to May of 68, and during that time frame of 1 year, they flew 29 sorties. 26 of those sorties were over Hanoi, because at that time frame, the Vietnam War was going on hot, so those were all over Hanoi for 26 sorties. The other 3 sorties were flown over North Korea. How many of you remember way back, test, we had a listening ship called the USS Pueblo, one of those picket ships that listens in on the bad guys? The North Koreans hijacked it, and they put it in a harbor. Our country had no idea where it was at. So they had the A-12s fly out of Okinawa and go right directly over North Korea. They found it on the second mission, and with the diplomacy, we got our men back, and we got the Pueblo back eventually. 15 of them were built. This is Burbank, California. Right downtown, real populated, very short runway, and a lot of people all around. Kelly said, hey, we can build these at Burbank at the Skunk Works, and that's what you see here. This is all the framed. There's an A-12 there. There's one of the tail. Here's the nose of an A-12. What they're going to do, this is a carriage box. The only place they could figure out that they could go to fly it in total secrecy was at that secret location north of Las Vegas called the Ranch, Area 51, whatever you want to call it. But they had to get the airplane there in bits and pieces. So they made these carriage boxes. That's going to hold the fuselage. Now here's the fuselage box built. There's a driver's seat, and this is the back of the carriage. A driver's seat on the left and a driver's seat on the right, and it being towed in the front. And that's to get it all around the corners of downtown Burbank through the streets and roads to get it up to the secret location. It was a 3-day trek, and on the way up, that's the lead. These are all the bits and pieces down to here. That's the end of it. It was a 3-day trip. Highway patrol in the front, highway patrol in the back, and they did it mostly in the nighttime. Very little daytime. There they are coming mid-desert. And now you see all the dirt they had to move just to make it to fit. Then they get up to Area 51, and they start putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. And now they're going to fly it out of the secret location. Here's the first flight flown by Lou Schock on April 26 of 1962. This is Lou right here after his flight. I don't know who these gentlemen are, but with their back to it, they're probably CIA people, knowing their pictures being taken. There's the F-104. You can see the tail of the 104. That's the chase plane for the first flight. 1962. These are the 7 gentlemen who flew it for the CIA. They were former Air Force officers who were asked, would you like to join some program that we can't talk about? And they raised their hand, they took the physical, they passed all the psychological tests, and they became sheep dipped, we called it in the military. They sheep dip them out of the military, resign their commissions, and now they get hired on by the CIA, and they get paid by the CIA. So now they're CIA people. These two gentlemen, Jack Weeks and Walt Ray, they're off the side because these two gentlemen were killed in the line of duty while flying the A-12, and that's why the two stars engraved outside of Langley, Virginia, where the A-12 resides, right outside of CIA headquarters. Inside of CIA headquarters, if you've ever been there, they have a wall, a granite wall, and they put a etched star, just like here, but it's gold on the inside. And they put a star for any CIA agent that's ever been killed in the line of duty. And there's this whole wall is just full of stars up there in the CIA. Very, very humbling to go up there and see it. Now they parked them. They flew those 29 sorties, and that's it. All the A-12s were parked, no more. What they did, they said, okay, how can we still get the intel that we need by using these? So what they did, they took an A-12, converted it from a single seat CIA project and made it an Air Force project, made a back seat in it for a launch control officer. And they got these drones. You can see this drone on the back of the mothership. The drone is called the D-21 and the mothership's called the M-21. The drone, 50 of them were built. And you'll see a testing flight here. That's a boom from the boomer. That's the drone. The principle is the airplane would get it up to 75,000 feet, Mach 3, and it would launch off the back of it at Mach 3. It's just like a slight gradual pushover with the A-12, very slight negative Gs, and the drone would go on its merry own way. Fly deep into China, deep into Russia, and come out over international waters, eject a palletized load of intelligence. C-130 with the boom on it would snag the intelligence. Well, on the 5th testing flight, this is a testing flight out over the Pacific, you can see the clearance. Look at the clearance between that left rudder and that drone. There's not a lot of clearance in there. On the 5th flight at Mach 3, 80,000 feet, when they did this little negative pushover and they ignited it, it veered to the left and it wiped the rudder out. The airplane broke up at Mach 3, 80,000 feet. Everyone got out except for the backseater, one of Kelly Johnson's test engineers. He drowned in the Pacific Ocean. And Kelly said, that's the end of this program. We're not going to go any further with it. Too high risk for such little reward. Well, by this time they had 50 drones built. They said, what are we going to do with all these drones? And they came up with an ingenious way. They said, we'll get a B-52. We'll get a B-52H model. We'll modify the 2 inboard pylons and put a rocket booster underneath the drone. And that's what they did. They flew in this configuration out of Guam. They flew basically 5 sorties, launched the drones into China, gathered 35-degree bank turn, which is standard. Look at my radius, 63 nautical miles. 63 nautical miles. If you do a 180-degree turn, that's a diameter of 120 some miles, so it's big, big turns. But the nice thing about it is you're above 60,000 feet. That's where all airliners and everything in the world stays below 70. Anything above, 60, anything above 60, there's no air traffic control. There's no routes, no airways. So the mission planners, they could plan, particularly over foreign airspace, they could plan our missions to go wherever they wanted with this large radius of turn. Gave them a lot of freedom. Ejection seat built by Lockheed, made just for the SR-71. It's a very good seat. We've never had anyone killed out of the airplane by ejecting with the SR-71 seat. It first comes up when you first squeeze the triggers, pull that little yellow handle, this little handle right here between the seat. You reach down between your legs and you pull it about an inch up, 1 inch, and you're on your way. It goes up about that far with a ballistic charge, goes kaboom, and then once there's a lanyard that's attached to the bottom of the airplane, so when it goes boom with the rocket, goes boom with the cartridge, then the pin is pulled and a rocket motor then goes kapoof, and they get you clear the rudders in the back. So it's ballistic and then a rocket. This is called a Buick. just like the automobile. This is our starting cart. The oil for this airplane is so thick. If I had it in this room, if I had a can of it in this room, it comes in 1 gallon cans. If I had a can right here and I turned it upside down, it wouldn't come out. It's solid. It won't do it. It's really thick viscosity. Because of those temperatures it's going to get up to, you need to start out with a very thick oil. Because of that, they had to heat the oil cans up before they could even pour it into the airplanes. This Buick has a spline right up on top here that connects right to the bottom of the airplane. So it's actually two splines talking to each other, 2 metal connections. And when the crew chief said, when I told the crew chief to start number 1, he would throw a signal to those guys back there, and they'd pull the throttle, which is right here. That's the throttle. They'd pull it all the way down, full bore, and this thing would just go roaring. It's 1,060 horsepower, 2 Buick Wildcat engines inside of here. And it's a mechanical shaft, and when it reaches the right RPM, it drops down automatically. Here's the interior of the Buicks. You see the crew chiefs, each crew chief had his own Buicks, and everyone had there was like a little they're sort of fighting each other. Who can do the best? Who can get the most chrome? Who can make their engines look the best? And there's no mufflers on these whatsoever. So when they pulled the throttle full out, inside one of those hangars, the noise in there level is just unbelievable. It's just like a big dragster. If you've ever been to a dragster, watch them go down, that noise is just it just makes everything shake inside the hangar. The ignition system for the airplane was very unique. Most of you know, maybe you don't, but jet engines, like when you go fly on an airliner or any jet you see, generally it's spark plugs. 2 very high spark plugs will provide the ignition system. Well, the fuel for this airplane is called, very one of a kind, it's called JP7. No other airplane uses JP7. JP7 has a very high flash point. I saw guys trying to light it with cigarette butts back when smoking was in vogue and throwing cigarettes into it. It would just extinguish. Because of that, the high flash point, the spark plugs, the igniter plugs that we use in jet engines are usually 2 for redundancy, wouldn't light it off. They just drowned out like spark plugs, just drowned out. So Kelly Johnson put his engineers to work and says, okay, how are we going to light this fuel off? And the engineers came back. He said, we've got an answer. And the answer is a liquid chemical. It's called triethylborane. We called it TEB for short, T-E-B, triethylborane. So when I say the word TEB, that's what I'm talking about. If I had a squirt gun right here, a sealed container of squirt gun in this room right here tonight, and I squirted it out into right this way, it goes kaboom when it touches the atmosphere. That's a chemical property of triethylborane. It explodes in contact with our atmosphere. Well, that became our ignition system. And each throttle, each engine, you had 16 shots. So when you start the engines, that's 1 shot. When you take off and you go up an afterburner, it sprays this metered amount of TEB in the back of the afterburner. It goes kaboom, and that lights off the fuel. Now here's a shot of the airplane inside the hangar, and they're just starting up. You can see the fuel's leaking all over the fuel. That's not a big deal with the SR. Like I said, the flash point's so high, you can throw a cigarette into it, it's not going to ignite. It does get very slippery, though, that this is sort of unusual. The crew chief wouldn't want to have this much JP7 on the ground. Very, very. There's the Buick on the left engine, and here they are starting the right engine. Here's the crew chief's assistants. He's got it, there's the connection right to the bottom spline, and whoever who took this picture got it perfect. That is the explosion from the TEB, the triethylborane, hitting the atmosphere. And that's how we start the engine. When you go up into afterburner for takeoff, it'll do the same thing. It'll supply the kaboom. This picture looks busy. I don't want you to get the impression that we hold all these sensors. This is just the variety of sensors that we can take up on the airplane. There's 4 bays all the way back. This is called the forebody. See where right here? The whole airplane actually can come apart right here from where the wings go. We call this the forebody and the aft body. 2 different places. So in this forebody, there's 4 bays on this side, and there's 4 bays over here where all these variety of sensors could go. So you could put 8 different sensors in, depending on what the mission called for. We could have a radar imagery, we could have wet film photography, and we could be using ELINT picking up signals as well. And here's one of the bays. That's one of the bays. They finally went to aluminum kind of insulation. When I got there in the program in 1974, all those bays were lined with the gold foil. It's all gold all inside because it keeps the temperature nice and consistent. They finally went into this. I'm not sure what it is. But these little things, these 4 wires going up there, the crew chief would put a speed wrench on there, like, and it would just take this thing up into a bay just like an elevator, and then it'd lock it in place. The nose was a move and replace nose. We could either have a radar imaging system, so that gives you all weather, day or night, or we could just have a dummy nose, one of the two. This nose is only held on by 4 bolts. There's one here, one underneath, and one on the side. That's the only thing that held that nose on, was 4 these big latches they had to lock down. Busy slide, but just want to show you real quick. This is taking the 80,000 feet. This is the SR. That dotted line's the ground track. Let's just pretend that's Cuba. We did a lot of overflights to Cuba for about a 4-year period. So let's say we're going right smack down the middle, the length of it, on this dotted line. These cameras with the orange, those are good for, that's radar imagery. It's good down to about 12-inch resolution with radar. And that gives you all weather, day or night capability. The blue is a camera that goes for 36 miles to the right and 36 to the left for a total of 72 miles. And it's like a big vacuum cleaner. For 72 miles, it's on all the time. It's picking up everything underneath the SR-71 out for 36 miles each direction. Whoops. This camera right here is good down to, oh, I forgot the radar. The radar's about 12-inch. This camera's about 6-inch resolution. This is our best camera right here. It goes for specific targets that are pre-programmed in the airplane, and what we call R2-D2, our brains of the back seat. These were good down to about 3-inch resolution, and I'll show you some pictures. You can see the actual pictures that we're taking. That's a picture. Now, I don't want you to think that was blown up. That is the picture. So now you can see what the interpreters and the intelligence people have to work with. They can blow that up a lot better. There's another picture. That happens to be Palmdale, California. And the reason I know it's Palmdale is because SARS. That's where we did our major overhauls, down at Palmdale, California. And that's another airfield. I have no idea what it is, but that is the actual picture from 70, 80,000 feet, which can be then blown up by the interpreters. The engine for the airplane was one of a kind. It's built by Pratt & Whitney. J58, 34,000 pounds each engine for a total of 68,000 pounds of thrust in full afterburner. This is on a test stand at Beale. And somehow the word always got out on base that we a run up. And the kids and the moms and the pops, everyone would come down to want to see it. So eventually we had to rope it off because the kids were wanting to get too close. So we roped it off for a noise problem. Everyone had earplugs and ear muffs too. You want to have them both on when this thing lights off. And the kids would have them on. I always, when I was the wing commander, I would get down with a bunch of candy. And I'd tell the kids, I say, if you can stand right here, where the edge of the rope was, while he's an afterburner, I'll give you some candy. When they light that afterburner, all these kids just run back as fast as they can. Because it really, your whole body shakes. I've challenged people to go up there and try to hold their teeth completely tight inside with your teeth. You can't do it. Your teeth just rattle the whole time. It's the only jet engine I know in the world, and you may know of one that can do it. It's the only jet engine I know in the world that's certified for 100% all the time, full-time afterburner operation. Most of the jet airplanes I flew that had afterburners, like the F4, T-38, 104, they either had a fuel consumption problem that they had to come out, or B, they had a time limit on it, one of the two. And this is all the time, full-time operation. Pressure suit operation. This is probably the downside to it, because you come out as a pilot. I came out of flying F4s. You have a flight suit on, and all all of a sudden you're going to be cramped in this pressure suit, and your mobility is reduced, heavy, a little bit bulky. Not pressurized, you merely wear it like this gentleman's wearing it. The only time it'll pressurize if you have to eject at 70, 80,000 feet, 85,000. If you eject, as soon as that canopy blows off, this thing goes poof. It just blows up like that. And that's what saves your life. You have your known environment now inside. You don't have to worry about the 80,000 foot or the 70 or the 60s. You now have your own environment. You've got your own oxygen. Weighs about 50 pounds, and of that 50 pounds, I would say 35 of it is probably from the neck ring on up. That's pretty heavy on your shoulders. It used to get real heavy. After you fly about 2 or 3 hours on it, it really get on you. And what you could do is you could just dial in pressure here and blow up the suit, and you take all the weight off. So about every 2 hours, I start to blow up my suit to get that weight off. Each suit's about $230,000. And every crew member had a primary and a backup suit. Every crew member had 2 suits that fit. They have to be fitted just for you exclusively. All the fingers, the arms, the legs, everything. They're maintained by a physiological support group that's at Beale Air Force Base, and we also had them at both Okinawa and Mildenhall, where we had the pressure suit. Had to breathe 100% oxygen the entire time. From the time you started the engines, and that's when you lowered your faceplate and locked it, until you came back and unlocked it in the hangar, you're breathing 100% oxygen all the time. And that's to preclude getting the bends. I'm sure many of you know scuba divers, when they go down in the water, if they come up too fast, they can get the bends, debilitating. It's usually in your knees, wherever you have a joint, elbows, hands, you can get the bends real quick. For us, we breathe 100% oxygen to preclude ever getting the bends, and that's why we stay on oxygen the entire time, because you can get the bends going up just as well as going down and then coming back up. To stay hydrated in flight, we took up water, Kool-Aid, Gatorade. I always took up one water, and I took one of Kool-Aid. And we were in squeeze bottles, like I'm sure you've seen marathoners or the Olympics when they're driving bicycles. They usually have some kind of water in a little squeeze bottle, so they keep running right. They just take their water and put it right back. So this one had a big nozzle on it, so you could push it through a little iris in your helmet, and I'll show that to you later. And you push it through, and that's how you get your water, your Gatorade, whatever you want to drink. The tube food kept you nourished in flight. And its tube food is exactly what it is. It looks like a baby, looks like a toothpaste tube. I always took up, that one happens to be key lime pie. I took up the macaroni and cheese and beef and gravy. Those are my 2 entrees. So you get 2 tubes, beef and gravy, macaroni and cheese, and I have my waters and a Gatorade. Where it sits in the cockpit, it gets very cold in there. Now remember, you're in the you determine the room temperature, but in the cockpit it gets pretty cold. So the food gets cold, your water stays cold. Taking that beef and gravy and macaroni and cheese and squeezing it down and taking it down cold was terrible. But I found if I take that metal tube and I give it a minute and a half side against that window, which was how hot? 622 on the outside. My best guess on the inside, it's about 325 to 350. I squeezed it, wedged it across, like up in the glare shield against the window. And sides, perfect. Came out real nice. It went down a lot better warm than it did cold. So I used that window as my in-flight oven for my food. This is a picture of the altitude chamber at Beale Air Force Base. It's a one-of-a-kind altitude chamber. How many of you remember when Felix Baumgartner did his jump out of that gondola? He came at the Beale prior to that on 3 separate occasions. He went to 90,000 feet, 100,000 feet, and I think his third one was up to about 130,000 feet. We have the only chamber at Beale that can do that. So he had to, obviously he wasn't in the military, he had to pay for that. This is the chamber. Right here, these 4 orangish looking lock. Once you get inside, this is the door. It doesn't look like a door, but that's your door. Once they lock these, you are in there forever. Here you can see the guinea pig on the inside. Once they start evacuating the air over here in the controller, it takes up here and it goes out this chamber and it goes into another huge chamber like if you've ever seen a big altitude chamber, and that's where the air is being pumped over into. Because what we're going to do eventually, once we get you at 80,000 feet in the chamber, we're going to pretend that you just ejected out of the airplane. So you have to be exposed to that 80,000 atmosphere so you get that poof, and I'll show you what happens. Armstrong's law says, basically, the boiling point of a fluid decreases as you go higher in altitude. And anyone that's been up the big mountaineers that go way high up in the, go up to 12,000 feet, 20,000 feet, whatever they can get up to, they know that as you go higher, they try to get their coffee boiling. It boils real quick up there because the boiling point decreases as you go higher. At 63,000 feet, the boiling point of water is 98.6. Ooh, what's our temperature? 98.6. This gentleman in the cabin, in the altitude chamber, this little water, they put it as a demonstration. Now, they don't do it all the time, but they're going to demonstrate you to what theoretically can happen if you didn't have a pressure suit on. They take that water, when they put it in there, it's at 98.6, just like our bodies. And then they start evacuating the air, and he'll be watching. He'll see it go through 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 63. As he goes through 63,000 feet in the cabin, you're sitting inside the pressure suit, you see this water just slowly starting to boil. When it goes through 70,000 feet, it's boiling real fast. And by the time you level off the chamber at 80, 85,000 feet, it's all evaporated. It's all gone. They're showing you very dramatically what could theoretically happen to your saliva or anything else that's liquid if you eject without a pressure suit on. And that's what the pressure suit does. It saves your life. That's a rapid decompression. That guy they're showing you what would happen if you just ejected at 80,000 feet. The suit just goes poof. Of course, you're ejecting, you're in the seat, you're going out, and the seat's tumbling, and you're going, there's no air up there. You're probably traveling 20 miles down the road just tumbling. But it has a drag chute that'll slow you down. And eventually, as you come down, you'll be like this, stiff as a board. That's to save your life. Now, they teach you, and they put us in this chamber so you can learn how to get mechanical advantage. You see this little connection right here in that little tab. If he pulls down on when you first get that boom, this neck ring sometimes goes right up to your nose. It goes kaboof, like this, and you can't see anything. So you pull down on this mechanical leverage to bring it back down onto your shoulders. And that's what they're teaching you in the altitude chamber. Before every flight in the airplane, every flight, doesn't matter if it's a training sortie at Beale or an operational sortie at Okinawa or Mildenhall, you had to eat a high protein, low residue, for obvious reasons, a meal before every flight in the airplane. They called it a high protein, low residue meal. And that's what we did. What you can't see here, you'd also have a backup crew sitting over here. So there's always two crews, the primary and a backup. And they'll all eat the steak and egg meal probably about 3 hours before takeoff. And we had locations at Mildenhall and a location at Okinawa where they had a secure system of no one knew what we were doing there. But we're going down to eat steak and eggs. Once the mission briefing is over with, everyone goes to the four winds, the refuelers, the mission planners, everyone's got a job to do. The crew, they have to go down and get suited up. Meanwhile, the backup crew, who was in the briefing, the backup crew goes out to the airplane, and they start pre-flighting the airplane right up to the start engine checklist. So when the crew comes out, they can brief them on anything they found wrong on the exterior flight or anything like that. You have to take a physical. The primary crew, downstairs or into the other room, it's not a big physical. They do, blood pressure, temperature, check your eyes, ears, nose, throat, record what time you went to bed, what time you woke up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They kept all this data on me for 7 years. My medical records were about that thick. Now, if this gentleman right here, if his pressure was too high or too low, or his temperature was too low or too high, they are grounded as a crew. Now you would call the backup crew to come out of the hangar, come back, get suited up, and then these gentlemen would be back up in the sense that they will do all that ancillary stuff. So you always have two crews ready for each mission, just in case you can't pass. We've had a few guys we had one gentleman that he always wanted, they call it the white coat syndrome. As soon as you see someone in a hospital, your blood pressure just goes up. And we had a couple guys that just automatically went up, got too high. Meanwhile, while you're doing all this, the physiological people are checking out your suit, making sure it's ready to go. Stand up, put your feet in, zip you up in the back. Then they put you on this oversized chair, and they go over every little nuance of the airplane, every zipper, anything that could cause you problems. They go over the entire pressure suit, and they check it for leakage. They blow it up real tight. They measure it. Now, the suit is not completely sealed. It'll always have air going into it, so it'll seem like it, but it has an acceptable tolerance for leakage. It's very, very small. If it didn't fit, I mean, if it was too much unacceptable, you'd go back and get in your backup suit. Then you get into this van that has the bolted seats on the floor, has your oxygen, and they drive you out to the airplane at Okinawa or Mildenhall or at Beale. Now, the question often came up, we only had one of these vans at both of our operations at Okinawa and Mildenhall. Someone posed the question one day, say, what do we do if the car has a flat tire? Let's say the engine doesn't start. How are we going to get the crew out? Well, you would all think, I'm sure, just put them in a car and go on out. But here's what they came up with. I think I'd just soon walk out. Once you get out to the airplane, the backup crew says everything looks good. You get in the van, you talk to them. If you found any write-ups, you'd say, hey, I found this and that. You still want to go? So you have a little one-on-one conversation with the front seaters, and the two back seaters talk as well. Everything's okay. You get up the steps. It's about 12, 15 feet up high. You climb up the steps, get in the plane, and you're taught. You can't see it very good, but this gentleman in the back's doing it perfectly. You put your hands out on those platforms. That's the way you're taught. You just put your hands out here. You can't see anything. You can't get your helmet down to see anything. There's 13 connections that those men in the white suits, the physiological people, they're trained of all 13 connections. And every connection, like your oxygen, your comm cord, your backup comm, your backup oxygen, all these different connections had a clip that went over so they wouldn't vibrate loose. So they were always clipped on. And then they'd read a checklist, and then one guy would read a checklist, and the other guy would tug on it, make sure it's nice and tight. That's the one time I really, really listened to make sure everything's in, because there's nothing you can do. You can't reach these things. If one comes off in flight, you can't put it back together. Now, this gentleman in the cockpit here, he's just breathing ambient air like you and I are right now. This is the visor. It'll come down, it'll lock right here, and then he'll be breathing 100% oxygen from then on. This is the microphone in here, your mic. This is called the Baylor bar. This little metal bar right here, it'll come down and we'll lock. Now you see this picture. This gentleman has now had his Baylor bar down, and it is now locked right here. He is now breathing 100% oxygen right in here. It's contained. It doesn't go through the rest of your body. It stays right here. There's where you put your tube food. That's an iris in there. You have to push it pretty hard. Push it through there. And then you can take your water, your Gatorade, and I found out another use for this. Every once in a while, not often, but every once in a while, I'd get an itchy nose on the right side. I could put one of those probes in there and I could scratch my nose like this. Because once you lower the faceplate, you're not allowed to open it again. It has to stay shut the rest of the flight until you come back, land, get in a hangar, and now you can raise it up. One of the worst things you can do in this thing, and it happened to me once, and it's happened to others, but no one ever told me about it. I had to sneeze real bad inside there. And it really blocks a lot of your vision. Nothing you can do about it. The only thing that's good is that you can't see it, but there's little gold wires. There's about 4 of them corrugated, go all the way across from left to right. So your faceplate is heated all the time. And sometimes if I sneeze and it got too cloudy, I could crank the temperature all the way up. Now, you're going to get hot on your face, but at least it would sort of get rid of all the fogginess. There's the SR taking out. When you fill your tires up with air pressure, what do you put in your tires? 35 PSI maybe, 37 at the most? Each one of these 6 main and 2 nose wheels, 400 PSI gaseous nitrogen, very high pressure. And they pump in gaseous nitrogen to keep it from exploding. If it does explode, having nitrogen in the tire minimizes the possibility of a fire coming from it. One day, Don and I were on the backup crew. The backup crew leads the airplane out. He's in a car, and you just do little S-turns on the taxiways, make sure there's nothing that's going to cut the tires, and the SR's crew, they're probably about 100 yards behind you. And you go out on the runway, they do their run-up. While they're doing that, you get on the runway for 7,000 feet, going down the runway, making sure nothing's going to cut the tires all the way down. We lost an SR-71 in 1967. It hit something on the runway, the metal came up, the tire blew, and the metal shards went right up into the bottom of the fuselage. That's where the tanks are. Fuel was pouring down, hot fuel, hot brakes, ball of fire going down. They eventually collapsed the gear, and the suppressant guys came out with the foam and got it out real good, and everyone got out okay. But we learned a lesson. From then on, we always have the backup crew leading the airplane out, looking for anything that's going to cut the tires all the way down the runway. One story, I'll give you a humor story. At Beale Air Force Base, Dawn and I, my backseater, we were in that job. We were on the mobile. We were leading the SR out. We're on a taxiway. Now, Beale, this is in Northern California. He says, Rich, stop the car. So I stopped the car, and the SR is 100 yards. He sees it, and I just gentle stop. Don gets out, and I see him up in front of me, about 20 yards in front of the car, and he's picking up what looked like golden ball bearings to me. He's picking them up. He comes back in the car, and he says, Rich, look what I found. I looked at him. I said, Don, throw those out the window. He said, no, look. So I said, throw them out the window. At Beale Air Force Base, Northern California, hot summer day with 100 degrees, we have the biggest jackrabbits you've ever seen in your life. He didn't know that. There's your takeoff speeds in miles per hour, 242 miles per hour. See the gear's on its way up. Then we accelerate to 460 miles per hour, climb to about 25,000 feet, and then we'll be heading to the tankers. The tankers, every time we hit a tanker, it's a cell. A cell of tankers for us is 3 airplanes. You have the primary tanker, a secondary tanker, and a third tanker just in case either one of the other 2 cannot refuel you. So these gentlemen had to stay in orbit. They stayed in a not real tight formation, but they stay in a wide formation. And they have to be on orbit 30 minutes prior to arrival. So them being slow and everything else, they have to take off way before we do to get to the orbit space. Sometimes if we're going out of Mildenhall and we're going all the way into the Mediterranean, going down that way, they have to pre-position at some other location, which we often happens. There's the SR getting refueled right here. He just flies it down. These are how the boom operator, he flies these little elevons, plugs it in. I let go of I hold my trigger to open it up, and on my stick, as soon as he goes in and locks, I let go of it, and now it's locked in with jaws, the air refueling boom. Every once in a while, when I go to squeeze the trigger to release those jaws, we've had a few times in airplanes when it didn't work. It stays mated. Well, the only thing you can do is what we call a brute force disconnect, where you talk about it for, here's what I'm going to do, the tanker knows. So you just take the airplane and you slowly, ever so slowly, just come back and you just rip it out. And you'll take that fuel connection thing right with you on the airplane. Obviously, you have to abort the airplane and you come back to either Mildenhall, Okinawa, or Beale. You can't fly it that way. But we've had a few of them have to do that. That's what I'm looking at underneath the airplane for about 40 minutes. A lot of people say, what's it like to refuel? And the SR, you lower the seat all the way down to the bottom, no matter how high you are. Because you got to look up like this, and you get a bad neck after about 20, 25 minutes of refueling. So you just lower your seat, and now you can see them right up there, and that's how you fly the airplane. Just maintain that position. Now, we do have director lights, tell you to go up and down or go left and right. But once you've flown this for a year, 2, 3, 4 years, you just fly that same position underneath. Weather's not always good sometimes. I remember refueling out of Okinawa, Japan, 3 o'clock in the morning, thunderstorms, lightning, St. Elmo's fire going up and down my front windscreen, lightning all around, left and right, and it was bumpy, and you had to get your gas. So the tankers try to find the best, smoothest air for you, but sometimes there just isn't any. Once you get your full gas, you come off the boom, clear the tanker to either which side you're going to start out. Light the afterburners now, and you're going to now hold 520 miles per hour. If you hold that all the way up, you'll level off at Mach 3, you'll be at 71,000 feet, and your fuel burn is 42,000 pounds an hour. I heard a lot of ooh, ah. Let me just put it in perspective. 42,000 pounds an hour is a lot of fuel. But what you can't get your head around is how far down the road you're going. What I did, when I came out of the Air Force, I flew for American Airlines for 13 years, but I had the flight manuals when I wrote my first book for the 727, the DC-10, and the MD-80. So I took average gross weights, average cruise altitudes for every airplane, and figured out the fuel flow for all three of the airplanes compared to this. At 42,000 pounds an hour, it's more efficient than the 727. It's more efficient than the DC-10. It's not quite as efficient as the MD-80, but real close. So that puts in perspective how efficient this is at 42,000 pounds per hour. And what you can't get your head around is how far you're going. Here's the cockpit. Looks busy. There's where my oven was, right there. I just cram it up in there, minute and a half, two sides. There's the stick. These are called bat wings. Each of these bat wings, at 80,000 feet, when you go into turn, as the sun's up here, it comes into the cockpit. You can't see any instruments. As it goes across the off the cockpit, everything's unreadable. It's just a whiteout. So we use these bat wings to chase and hide the sun so we can still see the instruments while we're in a turn, or flying straight and level. Backseater, he's actually, room-wise, he's got more room than I do in the front seat. But you notice there's no flight controls in there. That's why we take a physical before every flight. He's very grateful that I do. If I have the big heart attack up front, he's out of luck. If he dies on me, I'm out of luck as far as navigation goes. He owns all the navigation stuff. I'd have to sort of say, okay, Mildenhall must be about over there, a couple thousand miles, and I'd start heading back there. You know, where are my tankers? Well, the tankers are only in a very small part of the world. I probably couldn't even be able to find the next set of tankers. That's a shot from a U-2. We never allowed an SR to take a camera up. An SR on the camera, there's no place to put it, and if you did take it up and you had to eject, that camera bouncing around the cockpit could be a lethal weapon. So we never took anything that couldn't be tied down somewhere or put in a box. But the U-2s can do that. You can see a curvature of the Earth looking out one window, and that's one window. So if you look at that window, bring it around to the front, you can see a more definitive curvature of the Earth. And that's another shot from a U-2. That's another U-2 shot. That's Lake Tahoe underneath the wings. Coming back into Okinawa, that's obviously Okinawa with all the water. 210 miles per hour on finals, your speed. As soon as you touch down and land, you pull the T-handle and that drag chute comes out, and it's like it really throws you forward in the cockpit. When it hits the air, your whole body just shifts forward. Very, very. In fact, it throws you forward so much, a lot of people pull the T-handle and they hang on to it, and then when they get this drag push, it pushes it back in prematurely, and it jettisons their drag chute on the runway. So we're taught to pull it, take your hand off of it. This is a mission out of Okinawa. That's a young me way back when. I didn't have gray hair. That's the guy I flew with for 7 years, B.C. Thomas and Jay Reed. This is a very strange mission. We got 2 SRs airborne at the same time. And what we did, we're going to go just outside of China, out of Okinawa, just right outside their border, at 80,000 feet, which allows us to look a long way in. And we're going to have the 2 airplanes come head on to each other. So now you have a Mach 6 closure. The intelligence community wanted to see what the heck the reaction is. Did they even know the airplanes were there? Did they know there were 2 of them? Did they know they were going to come to each other? So you learn a lot by just doing something that seems very stupid. Let me see if I got a picture of that. No. And they learn a lot. They learn that, did they even see the airplanes? They see one, they see both. So with these airplanes, we also have what's called an RC-135. It's another, like a big tanker, if you will, but it's got a sophisticated intelligence stuff on it. They're out in safe areas out over the ocean, and they're recording everything that's happening, everything that the Chinese are saying, everything they're doing. Are they launching? Are they scrambling? Or are they just sitting there? Do they know anything about it? So they can learn a lot by doing something like that. We only flew this mission once where you had 2 airplanes going head on. Post-mission activity, first thing you do is get an intel debrief. If you didn't see anything, no SAMs were fired at you, ho-hum day, it would last maybe 25 minutes at the most. They have reports they got to fill out, so you have to answer all the questions. The ops debriefing, this is where we got together as crews and the ops officer, the squadron commanders, and we said, okay, these are no holds barred, open, frank discussion. And this is how we got our radio silent procedures down in about 2 months. We talked about everything that went wrong and how we can make it the next time much better. So that lasted for about 20 minutes, maybe 30. The maintenance debrief could, without any write-ups, no discrepancies whatsoever in this airplane, it would take about 30 minutes. If you had a write-up, it could take around 40, 45 minutes. If you had a write-up that has a temperature affected to it, like our hydraulic system, if my stick, my rudders, if the control surfaces don't seem like they're working right, they can't replicate those temperatures that you saw on that chart. They can't replicate that on the ground on the airplane. So they don't know what the problem is. So we would stay with them and try to diagnose it and troubleshoot it as best we could for as long as they wanted us there. So that was the name of the game, is to come back with a safe airplane. Mission's complete. There's one of those RC-135s I was telling you about that gathers up all that information while we're in close to the bad guys. I've got a short video here. It lasts about 5 minutes. It's called A Letter to Kelly Johnson. Would you like to see it? I don't know if you're getting too tired. But what it does, I'm going to go through it real quick. The movie was made in 1967, and this is when I was the wing commander. Bill, they came to me, Lockheed says, hey, Rich, we want to make another Top Gun. And I said, can I have some time to think about that? I said, yeah, take your time. I thought about a week, 2 weeks. I said, there is no way you're going to make a better movie with this over Top Gun, because that's my favorite. And they said, okay, we agree with that. I said, I'll let you guys come up. You bring all the cameramen and the photographers you want, and I'll have you run to the base. And they said, we'll make a documentary out of it. And that's what they did. It came out much better. Now, what you're going to see are clips from that. Kelly was being honored at the Smithsonian in October of 1990. He died in December of 1990, 3 months later, 2 months later. And that's why they made this letter to Kelly Johnson. They want to honor him for everything he did on the airplane. You'll see a Mach 3 contrail. You'll see it go across the screen and go from the left to the right. That gives you a good idea if you were on the ground watching it. You'll see what we did, something that we don't like to say we did. Over Okinawa, it's all the Pacific Ocean. You just throw a dump switch on and you'll get a contrail going. And that's what he did. And you'll see a Mach 3 pass. And at the end, you'll see the airplane that set a speed record. It went from Oxnard, California to Washington, D.C. in 68 minutes. And that was a record that's never been beat since. And that airplane is now at the Udvar-Hazy Center out at Dulles Airport, 972. Now let's see if this is going to work. We did a test earlier.
Dear Kelly, you and I have never met. I'm not a former SR-71 pilot or RSO. I wasn't a member of your design team at the Lockheed Skunk Works or on the assembly line that built the Blackbird. Nor was I a member of the Air Force at Beale, Mildenhall, or Kadena, who kept the Blackbirds flying. I'm not even an airplane buff in the classic sense. I'm just a person that had the privilege of being around your SR-71 Blackbird, and it was an experience I will remember intensely for the rest of my life. There's just something about your Blackbird, Kelly, that words don't adequately describe. Anyone who has been near a Blackbird and felt its presence knows what I'm talking about. It's a feeling in your gut, and instantly you want to be part of it. Part of what I call the Blackbird family. Today, Kelly, you are being honored for your design work on the SR-71, and justly so. To me, the SR-71 is not only your greatest aircraft design, it is perhaps the greatest aircraft ever built. I've heard it said that you considered the Blackbird the most fascinating challenge of your career. No wonder. It was a design that was so advanced that everything that touched it had to be new. New manufacturing processes, new tools, new materials, a whole new approach. You built an operational stealth aircraft a decade before most of the world had even heard the term. It was a design so far ahead of its time that it retired before time could catch up with it. In times of crisis, the Blackbird provided 6 presidents with a unique and critical view of the world. The Blackbird served this country for just over a quarter of a century. In that entire time, it stood in a class of one. To me, the Blackbird is much more than a technical marvel. It's an airplane that gets inside you, an aircraft that causes the adrenaline to flow just by looking at it. Kelly, your Blackbird is the stuff dreams are made of. It's the model plane sitting in a young child's room, proof that everything is possible, that the sky isn't the limit. And it's the poster hanging on the office wall of a middle-aged engineer, testimony that yes, even in the real world, miracles do occur. The SR-71 embodies all that excites people about aerospace. Its crew seems part pilot, part astronaut. The Blackbird itself appears part airplane, part spacecraft. The typical Blackbird fan is a cross-section of America. It's your grandfather, your niece, your son. It's the wide-eyed young kid that buys an aircraft book at the National Air and Space Museum. It's the family that traveled hundreds of miles to an air show just to see a Blackbird in person. It's the people on the Air Force Base that stopped what they were doing to watch an SR take off. Everyone, every time, no matter how many times they'd seen it before. And it's the pilot who last flew the Blackbird 20 years ago, who has the look in his eye that says, I flew the best aircraft ever made. The look that can barely contain the desire to get in an SR just one more time and light the burst. When Blackbird 972 made its final record-setting flight to Dulles Airport, I watched the television with mixed emotions. This was the Blackbird's final flight. An aircraft that was the very definition of speed and power would fly no more. But my sadness was tempered by the knowledge that this plane would now truly belong to the nation, coming to rest in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Now millions would be able to do what I had done, be near a Blackbird, be part of the family. Kelly, in the years to come, whenever I want to experience your airplane's majesty, I will remember the time I spent with your Blackbird, the smell of JP7 fuel, the feel of it on the soles of my shoes, the sound of an air starter wind up, the TEB ignite, and I'll put on the film that we shot during those incredible weeks in 1987. I'll watch it, feel it, be part of it again. Because in movies, Kelly, like in our memories, your Blackbird will fly forever. Congratulations, Kelly, and thank you. Devin Hawker, Assistant Cameraman, Blackbird, the movie.
I hope you enjoyed that. This really pays tribute to the guy who deserved it. This is a speed run we did back at, from Beale. This is the New York to London. This is the first time we ever put the SR on international display was in 1974. And they said, let's set a record. We'll go over to the annual air show. And we'll take off from Beale over here. We'll refuel up in Mountain Home area, go across the United States, refuel off the coast, and we'll climb up and accelerate. So here's where the timing gate started in New York City. They're crossing it right at Mach 3. Mid-Atlantic, they have to come down, refuel. So you got to come down, slow down, all the way into London, hour 55 minutes. And that's the first time it was ever put on international display in 1974. Then on the way back, they said, let's set another record, except go to LA out of here. So they ferried the airplane out of Farnborough, ferried it up to Mildenhall, prepped it, and then they took off for the timing gate. They refueled right off the northern coast of Ireland. That got them into refueling off Canada, all the way down to Los Angeles, 3 hours and 47 minutes. A little story on coming down into Los Angeles. The crew at that time was Buck Adams and Bill McCorrick. They were flying it back with a speed record. And to preclude booming too much of Los Angeles, because there's a lot of glass in Los Angeles, they started the descent way outside of LA on the way down. Well, they happened to have, just ironically, they had a hydraulic problem on the airplane at Mach 3 coming in, and they had to troubleshoot it. So they get through the checklist and go through this and go that. Meanwhile, while they're doing this checklist, they're getting closer, closer. They're getting past their descent point. Now when they start down, when you have a sonic boom, as you come down, it creates sort of like a supersonic boom. I mean, a big boom, because now you're sort of pushing it as well as coming down with the sonic boom. So as they did, they got a lot of houses and broke a lot of windows. But how many of you remember Zsa Zsa Gabor? She had a house made out of glass. They broke every window in her house just by that little 2-minute delay on this emergency. The Air Force saw a great opportunity to get some favorable advertisement out of this, so they had Buck and Bill go down along with some handlers with the check and all that for the thousands and thousands of dollars to get their windows redone. All of the SRs retired in 1990. However, they came back for a very short time in 93. There were 4 senators that were very proactive and liked the SR. Senator Glenn, Senator Nunn, Senator Stevens, and Senator Byrd. Those 4 senators were very influential in Congress. And they said, we're going to put in, I think it was 250, maybe 300 million to bring back just 3 airplanes, not this whole fleet of them, just 3 SRs, get 3 crews, bring them back that have previously flew it, and just be ready for any contingency that might crop up around the globe. So that's what they wanted to use it for. And they got the 3 crews. They formed up down at Edwards Air Force Base, because Edwards, when that 1990 closure, all that infrastructure went down to Edwards. So they reformed at Edwards with the crews. And between that time of closure until 97, nothing happened around the globe. And they were finally retired in 1997. October of 97. That was the last time they ever flew it. However, those of us who flew it still believe now I can guarantee you Elvis has never had a ride in the airplane. We did take up a lot of DVs, senators, congressmen, you name it. We even took up a preacher once. His name was Father Hesburgh, president of Notre Dame University. I don't know who he knew. I can't remember who was the president at that time, but Father Hesburgh got a ride in the SR-71. The only thing I could figure, he wanted to be closer to the man, that's all. Here's a summary of all the sorties from 1968. These are operational sorties from 1990. Over 17,000, over 53,000 hours, and over 11,000 hours at Mach 3 or greater. And we only had 86 pilots and 86 navigators. That's it. Total crew force for all that 22 years. Very small cadre. Now, if you read one of my books or you read online, you're going to see a whole list of people that flew it or got a ride in it. And unfortunately, I exclude a lot of the NASA people who flew it. I'm talking about operational reconnaissance sorties, 86 pilots and 86 navigators. I would be very remiss if I didn't talk about the maintenance folks. I think you get a good feel here how this airplane can turn around and bite you real quick. And these men and women stay up all night, all day to make a safe plane for me to fly. If this plane comes down with no write-ups whatsoever, just put in the replenishables, the oil, the fuel, and let me fly it again. 24 hours minimum to get this thing ready for the next flight. And that's with no write-ups. And they do a good job of keeping this a safe plane. When I pull into the hangar and I shut my engines off in the hangar, my job is done. These men and women now, the Intel folks, they now have to download all those sensors, take them inside, and turn this into meaningful information, and then disseminating it to the intelligence agencies. And one thing I learned about intelligence all my life, if you don't do this quickly, you'll be history real fast. Today, everything's pretty much real time because we got satellites that can do it. Not back then. The tanker folks, again, I can't say enough about them either. They have always been on station all the time, every time. We've had a few occasions where the SR is in bad guy territory and he's low on fuel for one reason or another, and it's on the radio and he's screaming bloody murder, saying, help, help, come and get me, I need fuel, I'm gonna run out of fuel. And these guys have come out of their safe havens and come into the bad guy territory and rescued SR-71s. And they've got some good wards and decks for doing that. Anything on the future? I don't know. Last thing I read in Aviation Week, space technology, they're working on something that's going to go faster. As soon as they get this scramjet thing finished, we'll get up to Mach 5 pretty soon. These are the 5 books I've written on the SR-1. I believe the museum has some here. If you get one here at the museum, buy one, I'll be glad to autograph it. I don't know how much later we can stay up, but I'll stay here until I need to. I don't know if we do. Do we have time for questions, or want to do questions or not? I didn't.
Absolutely, we'll do questions. If you want to raise your hand, just be patient. Don will come around and with a microphone, and we'll get a question here. So stand by 1 second. There's some right there.
Habu is a snake indigenous to Okinawa. It's a black adder, very aggressive and very ferocious. It's not a very big one, but the Okinawans, this is going to be nasty, they used to put in a cage, and they would have a mongoose on one side, and they have the mongoose on one side, and they have the habu snake on the other side. It's a black adder. That's what its name is, habu. And they put the two together and let them fight. It's gross. I saw it once, and I said never again. But the Okinawans, that's what they're into. You know, we see boxing and wrestling that gets pretty ferocious. They like snakes fighting each other.
So I've got a question. I fly an airplane that's much slower than the one you flew, and when I pre-flight it, I have a dipstick that I check the oil level on, and typically the viscosity is such that it's liquid when I pull the dipstick out. How do you check the oil on an SR-71 if it's that thick?
It's heated. Before they put they heat the oil up, so when they put the oil in, the cans, if I had a can of the oil right now turned upside down, I could shake it out, but it would come out as a chunk. So they have to preheat the oil, and it will pour in. Now, you're talking about checking the level. I just trust the crew chief. You know, he comes out with the forms, the 781 forms. I just believe that he did everything he's supposed to do. I don't go out and check the oil. Yeah. But once they get it heated up, and just looking at the airplane's engine and the accessibility, I think they could probably get to the actual oil container, if you will, and heat it up if they needed to. But they just know how much is in there. Yeah. I don't know whether there's a dipstick or not. I really don't know. Wait. Who's got another question?
Can you describe an unstart? Somebody heard you say, can you describe an unstart?
Okay, the gentleman asked, can I describe an unstart? Unstart's very difficult to describe. It's an aerodynamic maneuver. It has nothing to do with the engine. The engine's just running great. Both engines are running great. That air that's coming into those cones, those pointy cones, the air that's coming all in around there, it's coming back and being re-accelerated to come out. It's going through different louvers and different aerodynamics inside to give you more thrust coming out. That's what you're trying to do, is utilize that Mach 3 air. And I'm getting off the, what was the question? Unstart. The dynamics of that air coming in and the way they go all the way through the airplane and go back and come out the exhaust, it's very, very, a couple points coming through the inlet. If this thing burps a little bit, if it just gets a little bit more air on one side or not enough, it'll go kapoof, it goes burps. And this thing just pitches and rolls. If this is the offending engine, my left engine, it pitches and rolls because this one's still full afterburner. It's going like that. And if it's the other one, it goes like that. Now we're taught in the simulator, simulator is real good at replicating this, we're taught how to control it. But the makers of the inlets, they said, we can fix this. Because a lot of guys were getting close to losing the airplane. Early on, they were going really wild excursions and pitches and rolls. They just about lost it a couple times. And they said, we need something to stop this. You never guess what they came up with. It's so ingenious. I could have thought of this. No, probably not. What they do, when we go through Mach, as we climb, when we get through Mach 2.3, a little cross valve wires talk to each other from each inlet. And now, if this left engine unstarts, it sympathetically unstarts the other one. So now you stop the yawing motion, but now you've got doubled your drag, and this thing it's like hitting a barn door in the cockpit. But you've solved one problem, which was a dangerous one, to one that just slows you down. So that's the better of two evils, basically. So that's how we did it. Yeah. And then what you do, you just let the two switches, take them back up to go back out, and the spikes would then go back out, and you sort of hold your breath and teeth as these things go back out, and generally you're on your merry way. It's just a little transient that caused it. It could have been electrical transient, or it could have been an aerodynamic transient. But unstarts are very, very, if you're not on top of them, you can lose it early on. Once you sympathetically started the other one, you weren't going to go anywhere, but you just slow down like a barn door. It's pretty dramatic. Over here. I can't hear.
How many times did a crew have to eject from an SR?
How many times did a crew? I would say 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm getting pretty high here. I'm not sure. I'll say 10. Yeah. And I'll say of that, 3 test pilots and 7 crew members. It could be close. Yeah. That's it. Without me researching it, I don't know that number by accident. Go ahead.
Would that result in the loss of the plane?
Oh yeah, if you eject it, that's not. Yeah.
What? All right. Would the U.S. try and pick up the pieces, so to speak?
The only one we picked up is the one that the last one we lost. It had a crew in it. They were out over the Philippines, and the airplane just went bananas. They ended up ejecting at 10,000 feet. They landed about, I'm going to say, 500 yards offshore. Fortunately, they landed in the water. And you got a one-man life raft. They were in their life rafts. And the Filipinos, there was a village right there, and they saw all this happen. So they got out in their dugout canoes, and they picked them out of the water, and they took them to their little village. The only problem was their village didn't have any telephone or any communication, so they had to give them a mule ride down to the next place. Go ahead.
How many times were you shot at with SAMs?
How many times were we shot at with SAMs? I personally, my 7 years, none. We've probably had SAMs fired out of the Korean DMZ. I know a couple there. We've had SAMs fired over Vietnam. Every time they went over Vietnam, they were firing SAMs at them. That was no secret up there. Let's see, Milton Hall over there, not over there, not over there. I'm just guessing. I would say SAMs probably 15, 20 times. Yeah. A lot of times they didn't even know we were there. Yeah. Anything else? In the back. Speak up.
What intelligence was generated
On what?
Intelligence?
Intelligence?
Yeah, what did we find out?
That's probably the one thing that most crew members don't have an answer to. You know, that getting that picket ship out of the bay over Korea, that was one, that the CIA airplane A-12 went over, and they found that the picket ship that we lost. I don't know of anything, you know, we were just getting intel for the users for SAMs and MiGs mostly, where the SAMs were at, the surface-to-air missiles, what their capabilities were, and the MiGs. I've had MiG-25 come up to try and get me. Couldn't do it. He went underneath the airplane, 3 of them. I was taking off out of Okinawa. We were going up to a place called Murmansk. It was the Aleutian chain coming down. At the very bottom of that chain is a place called Petropavlovsk. We call it Petro for short. The Soviets had a nuclear sub-pen up there, and they also had some the subs. And I can't, what else? There's another interest they had up there. I know there's an airfield. But anyhow, I was going up there, clear day, refueled off of Japan, back up, cruising at 75, 80,000 feet, and I could see blue water all around, no clouds, perfect storm. And I looked off the nose, I could see, I saw a contrail. I said, as I got closer, I could see it was a circle contrail. So I told Dawn, and my back said, Dawn, I don't know what it is, but I see a circle. As I got closer, I could see 3 individual pieces of the circle, so I knew there were 3 airplanes up there. So he got all his cameras, and he has a view sight, look right beneath us. And we got up there, I saw them come out of a circle, and now they caught and trail behind each other, all 3 of them staggered, probably about by 15, 10 miles each other. And then I saw contrail, then I saw the contrail stop, so I knew they had lit the afterburners, and they tried to come up and get us, but nothing happened. It's futile for them. I told Don in the back, he can take happy snaps. He can look through his view sight and take a picture of that, picture there. He got a picture of all 3 of these MiGs just falling out of the sky. So, yeah, it was futile for him, I know that. Go ahead, lady. Gonna have to speak up. I can't hear.
Tell me what it looks like breaking the speed of sound.
My wife knows I'm deaf.
He asked what it is like breaking the speed of sound.
You don't know anything when you break the speed of sound. The only thing you see is your indicator. Well, we had different indicators. We had computer-generated stuff with your Mach number and speed and altitude. But if you just look at your pedostat, look at the airspeed, it just does a little burp, and that, you know you've gone through the sound barrier. And then everything goes up, you know, Mach 1, 1.5, 2, 2, 3. So you don't really feel anything at all. There's no sensations whatsoever going through the sound barrier. Go ahead.
One question right there. Could you stand up and ask your question right there? Yep.
What was the highest G maneuver you did?
Ooh, very G restrictive. When this thing was subsonic, you were good for maybe. We pitched that. If you go into a 60-degree bank turn, it's going to be 2 Gs going around 60 degrees. And we would get pretty close to that. 3 Gs, cold, okay, maybe up to 4 Gs. But supersonic, when this airplane gets hot, you're going to start bending metal up there. So we were very, very G restrictive. I don't even know what number. Our absolute max bank while we're flying at Mach 3 or greater, absolute max bank was 45 degrees of bank, because now you're pulling Gs. Whatever that comes out to, that was our max Gs we were allowed to pull at 45 degrees of bank.
Go ahead, Don. Let's do one more, and then I'll come up. So.
Okay.
How did it feel to be untouchable by anything?
I don't know where it's coming from.
Oh, right back there. He said, how did it feel to be untouchable by anything?
What's that? How's it feel? How's it feel to be untouchable? I can never convince my wife of that. That doesn't work. Trust me, no. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to stick around. If you got anything you want me to sign, I'll be glad to sign it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
On behalf of all of us here, the staff and members and visitors here at the EAA, there's just a little something we want to present to you to say thank you for your service. Thank you for coming all the way from Texas to spend a little time with us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
very much. Appreciate it. This is going to go. I know where this is going to go. My wife, I got all my paraphernalia on the walls of everywhere in the house. She calls it the I Love Me room. This is going to go in the I Love Me room. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. We will, I know a lot of you want to come up and have something signed or get a picture. So if we can just kind of make a line and do that, we can do that. I did pay the CAP back. I found a ribbon and presented it back to them. One of their uniform pieces fell off, so I feel better. I made up for forgetting them at the beginning here. So again, thank you guys so much for coming. We look forward to seeing you again. Like I said, we have the Wright Brothers banquet coming up in December, and then we start all over again in January. So thank you all for coming, and have a good evening.